Purdue starts their March Madness journey against High Point in a 4-13 matchup. We will break down everything that you need to know right here on Boilers in the Stands coming up right now.
It's Zach Eady with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me is my co-host, Kraig Bowers, and our good friend of the show, Bobby Buckets, Bobby Riddell, here to preview everything that you need to know about High Point Purdue's opening round matchup of March Madness. An interesting team, a team that is built very well offensively and not so well defensively, but we'll dive into all that. We'll talk a little bit kind of high-level March Madness stuff and get some insight from somebody who has been to March Madness as a player. So, Kraig, I'll throw it to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, and I'm glad this is finally here. It's what the season builds up to all year long, and that's not to take anything away from the regular season, because obviously when we talk to the coaches every year, they have three goals. One, win the regular season conference. Two, win the Big Ten tournament. And then three, make it as far as you possibly can in the NCAA tournament, right? So those are the three big goals, and this is the third one, but in many ways it's the way that a team is measured. It's the way that coaches are measured in this league, for better or worse. So I'm excited, and I'm glad it's finally here. Bobby, I know Greg couldn't be on tonight, and he's been heckling you all year about not jumping on the show as much as we've had you on in the past. And quite frankly, that's been as much Joe and I's fault as it's been anybody's, because we've been super busy with all these preview shows and haven't done as many of the kind of special extra edition type shows throughout the season. But we're super happy to have you on. I know Joe or Greg is going to be really jealous that he didn't get to join us tonight. But for people that don't know, Bobby, just tell people your background with Purdue in terms of what you're doing now and what you did as a player when you were on the team. Or
sure,
when you were on the team, I guess I should say.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. First off, good seeing you guys, and always fun chatting Purdue basketball with you guys, and it's fun running into you guys at the game and stuff whenever we get a chance. But yeah, as far as my background goes, I was a player from 05 to 09. My freshman year was Coach Painter's first year as head coach, so it's been kind of cool to think that I've been able to be a part of his journey at the beginning, and then now here on the back end, as a radio broadcaster alongside Rob Blackman on Purdue Radio, getting to see it up close and personal once again, and of course following him along his whole tenure here. And now he's a top 4, I think, winningest coach in Big Ten history, which is pretty unbelievable to think that I got the opportunity to play for a guy like that. So yeah, that's kind of my deal. This is my 5th year now on the radio broadcast team as the color commentator, working alongside Rob Blackman. And I've been spoiled. Purdue's been really, really good ever since I've been fortunate enough to be doing this. And this year was the first year we ever even lost 3 games in a row while I was doing this.
Wow.
We ended up having a 4-game losing streak total. So how dare those guys make me call that many losses in a row, right? Just kidding. But yeah, it was so it's been a heck of a run, getting to do this. Obviously last year, unbelievable experience, getting to go all the way to Phoenix with the team and go to the Final Four. So hopefully now that have returned to March Madness, there's more great memories for Purdue in store.
Yeah, and I shouldn't have to tell anybody, I shouldn't have to make you intro yourself, but we do have some younger viewers out there, and even Joe, when I talk about some players every once in a while back from that era, that's even a little young for his era to some sort of degree.
I feel like I've been very open. I became my first year of being a fan of Purdue was 2018-19. That was my freshman year. That was the Carson Edwards Elite 8 run. It was a very good year.
It's a good year.
But yeah, definitely I will own that. I was not a Purdue fan growing up per se.
Yeah.
What year were you born, Joe?
Just barely in 1999.
1999, yes. Okay. So like when Robbie and Etuan and Juwan were playing, you would have been old enough to at least maybe remember those guys
I
playing.
watched, yeah. I watched them in high school because
Yeah.
I'm from the region, and then obviously some in college. But yeah,
Nice.
Oh, here we Gavin Lambert here, Bobby. Not to make you feel old, but I wasn't even alive when Bobby played. Sorry, Bob.
Dang, Gavin. That's
So it is good to remind the viewers of your background and your affiliation with Purdue and everything that you did. Having gone through those teams, Bobby, and going into NCAA tournaments, I'm sure some teams you were on were going in with a little more momentum than other teams. Obviously, this team has struggled down the stretch, losing, I believe, 6 out of their last 9 games. Their entire body of work is really impressive. They have some really impressive wins throughout the season. But as a team going into the NCAA tournament, having gone through some adversity late in the season, just how do you approach that as a player? How do you approach that as a coach? Do things change? Are they a little different maybe than the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's interesting because during my playing days, we definitely had multiple ends of the spectrum as far as how our momentum was going into the big dance. My sophomore year, because my team, when I was a player, we made it to the tournament my sophomore, junior, and senior year. So that was a neat experience getting to go 3 times. In my sophomore year, we were kind of on the bubble. We were in that spot. It was the first team that Coach Painter ever took to the NCAA tournament. We had Carl Landry and David Teague were kind of our best players. Mm-hmm. Chris Kramer was a freshman, really good freshman on that team that year. And we had to kind of win a game in the Big Ten tournament. We felt like to make sure we were in. Now we've kind of all seen, at least this year and in past years, not sure how much the Big Ten tournament goes into things, all these conference tournaments, but it does feel like they at least do consider some of those last final spots from a bubble standpoint with the conference tournaments, maybe more than the seeding overall. And we ended up beating Iowa in that 4-5 game and then lost to Greg Oden and Ohio State in the second round. But we felt like when we beat Iowa, that was going to be enough to get in the tournament. And then sure enough, we got in and we were in the 8-9 game, beat Arizona and then lost to Florida. The next year, my junior year, we had the baby Boilers come in. We go 15-3 in the conference. We're playing extremely well. We end up getting second to Wisconsin. Wisconsin goes 16-2, and the only 2 losses they had were to Purdue twice. Unfortunately, no one else could beat Wisconsin that year. But going in the Big Ten tournament, we lose the very first game to Illinois. And so you're thinking, oh, man, that just stole all of our momentum. We're not playing as well as we were hoping going into the big dance. And then we go into the NCAA tournament and we win the first game, but then lose the second. So it ended up being kind of the same as year before. And then my senior year, we ended up winning the whole Big Ten tournament. It was kind of like a Michigan thing this year to some degree, not quite to the level they had it where they lost 3 games in a row to close the regular season and then won the Big Ten tournament. But we struggled down the stretch of the regular season my senior year. We even lost on senior night to Northwestern. I always give Robbie and Etuan and Juwan and those guys a hard time. Chris Kramer for not stepping up for me on my senior night and carrying us to victory. But, so then, we go into the Big Ten tournament kind of, not playing our best. And then we were able to respond like Michigan did and got on a hot streak and won the whole thing. And then we went to the big dance and went to the Sweet 16 and gave UConn a decent game in the Sweet 16. So I guess long story short, I don't really know what sort of correlation there is between the Big Ten tournament and the closing regular season, how you do in the NCAA tournament. I think it really is random. I don't think you can really connect a lot of stuff. I think it's matchup based. And I do think there's a part of like, hey, it's a clean slate now that you get to the NCAA tournament. And you can kind of change your frame of mind no matter, whether you're struggling or whether you're hot. And so, lots of different circumstances from when I played.
And I know, obviously not being a player at all, but just filling out a bracket over the years, looking at a bracket and being like, oh, this team seems to not be playing their best basketball right now going into the tournament. And then you'll see some of those teams go on deep runs. And vice versa. You'll be like, oh, this team's super hot. Boom. Beat the first game. And it's like, what's going on here? So obviously, to your point, I think a lot of it is clearly matchup based, just in terms of who you draw, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Joe seems to be having a little bit of technical difficulty, so he's trying to hop off and then come back on here. Bobby, if I was to ask you as a Purdue fan, okay, sell me on why this Purdue team can make a Sweet 16, Elite 8 type of run. What are the things that jump out to you covering this team all year that would kind of give a Purdue fan faith that these things can happen and this team can still make a deepish type of run?
I do think what gives me a little bit of confidence for sure is I do think offense over defense, they're both vitally important. You know, the team that wins the national championship every year, I think like in the Ken Pom era always is like top 10 in offense and, you know, maybe top 35 in defense or something like that. So you can see just based on that the offensive piece is more important theoretically than the defensive piece as far as, you know, how valuable it is to be top 10 in offense. And, you know, this Purdue team is a pretty high-powered offense. I think that because of our defensive issues, I think it is more important that we're a better offensive team, say, versus defensive team. So I think that does work in our favor, at least because I think, you know, being able to shut multiple teams down game after game and have scoring issues game after game would be tough to go on a long stretch. I think if you can get hot offensively at the right time, that can kind of carry you forward, I think, as we've seen with some of these teams in the past. And then guard play is so critical in March, as we see year in and year out. And Braden Smith being a first-team All-American can't really start in a much better place than that. So Braden's a guy that's seen it all. You know, was the point guard when they lose to a 16 seed, but he was also the point guard when they went all the way to the national championship game. Big Ten Player of the Year now. You know, I would think his confidence, you know, is sky high going into a tournament like this because of all the, you know, different things he's seen and the success he's had. And hopefully, you know, we're able to ride his coattails far because guard play is critical. Fletcher Lawyer, another guard who's, you know, dynamite when it comes to shooting the basketball, a guy who always seems to kind of relish the big games. You know, I feel like he always has some of his biggest shooting performances in the biggest games. And so hopefully you get big game Fletch from that standpoint. And then Trey Kaufman-Renn is one of the best, you know, scoring forward/centers, however you want to categorize them in the country. And, you know, I feel like most teams don't see a lot of guys like Trey. Like I know a lot of teams definitely don't see that sort of ball screen combination that we have with Braden and Trey. And so you hope kind of in a situation like, say we win the first game, you're going to have a short turnaround, short prep for either McNeese or Clemson against us in that second game. It's not a lot of time to try to get ready for a Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn ball screen combination. And we've seen how deadly they can be.
Right, for sure. And I think obviously this Purdue team has proven to be dynamic offensively, and that's backed up by the Ken Pom numbers, right? They still rank 7th offensively in Ken Pom, 19th overall, I think both in Ken Pom and the net coming into this. So obviously just coming into this and seen some Purdue fan chatter back and forth about the offense. And in my mind, I just keep looking at it and say, we are fine offensively, right? Defensively. Now, right, there's always special situations or whatever.
You can have an off shooting game like we had against Michigan, for example. Like you, as Coach Painter said after, we got quality shots, but you have a bad shooting game. And that can happen. And we saw it with Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament championship game, right? They were lighting the world on fire, and then they have a bad shooting game. And they fall. So, yes, you can be a good offense and have a poor shooting performance for sure.
Yeah, 100%. But by and large, this team is fine offensively. Obviously, defensively, they could be better. But also, at some point, you kind of are who you are, right? Like, as you hear the talk about, we need more rim protection, we need more of this. It's the team is who it is at this point in the season, right? And they can play defensive better. But it's not like Daniel Jacobson is walking out of that tunnel next week, right? So I guess defensively, as you've watched this Purdue team going into the NCAA tournament, what things do you think this team with this personnel can do better as they go into this matchup against a high-powered offense?
Yeah, I think defensively, you know, certainly like Coach Painter always talks about the offense and defense work hand in hand. So I'll start off with, we would really help ourselves if we, one, don't, have live ball turnovers, if we don't miss a ton of shots, so we can actually see the ball go through the net. They have to take it out. It's rare. Like teams like Michigan State, those are pretty rare. Those teams that really push the ball quickly in transition after made field goals. And so, if you can make shots, get back and set your defense, we give ourselves a better chance because, transition, we're not a good transition defensive team. We're not going to have a lot of like guys coming over late in transition to block shots and protect the rim and things of that nature. So being good offensively is going to go a long way for helping us get better on defense. But then I still think defensively, for being a team that doesn't have a lot of great individual defenders and we don't have a lot of great rim protection, as you talked about, we really got to be assignment sound, and we got to have major attention to detail from a scouting report standpoint. And I think that's where sometimes this year, unfortunately, we've had some, breakdowns more often than you would like from a lot of guys that are fully capable of being more assignment sound. And we'll see how things transpire in this matchup. But with this being a good offensive team, we got to be assignment sound. You got to follow the scouting report. And guess what? Sometimes, if a guy's a non-shooter, he steps up and makes a shot. The coaching staff always says, like, that's on us. Like, if you do what we tell you to do and we play the percentages and things of that nature and they step up and hit shots, like, that's okay. But way too often this year, we've had situations where we don't really follow what the coaching staff is designed. And then we get burned. And then the coaching staff's like, well, how are we supposed to know if what we designed was going to work or not if you guys don't follow it? And so hopefully our guys are fully locked in from a defensive assignment standpoint.
And now, thank God, we have Joe back, because I was going to be really scared if I told him, I was like, with two people on a preview show, I'm just going to primarily be the host and ask the questions. And if I had to cover the technical side on High Point, I was going to be really worried. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited that Joe is back. But to your point, Bobby, I think people took Painter's comment of like, when we make shots, we play better defense, is like it being kind of how the Purdue players felt, or an emotional response. Yes. And it's not, to some degree it's that.
It is that
also,
too, for sure.
But also you get to set your defense, and even on missed shots, it's not true transition, but if you watch tape on High Point, they'll take the rebound and go. So it just helps that defensive flow in general. Joe, I'm going to turn it to you as we kind of start to focus on High Point a little bit more here. But the first question I'm going to ask you is, if I would say, what are the qualities of a double-digit seed historically that leads them to be able to upset higher seeds? What are some of the traits that you would call out?
Yeah, obviously, just from an in-game standpoint, there's just always the random, hey, we shot 55% from three on high volume. Like, right, you just have those random in-game variances. This is more anecdotal, and I wanted to dive deeper into it, but maybe it'll be an off-season thing probably at this point. Is like, to me, I think you have to be really good at like a certain thing. If you can be really, really good at one thing, that at least gives you a chance. Because, right, I understand this is basketball in general, but especially right now, right, where it is a one-game single elimination, you have 40 minutes, both teams have 40 minutes to try to figure out certain questions, right? Like, okay, how do we defend this? How do we take away this? Or how are we going to, get the ball in the hoop, basically, right? And you have 40 minutes to figure out, hey, this team is doing this well. How do we stop that? And so, right, if you are a very good team, or very, very, very specialized or good in one specific area, I think it can give you an advantage because it's something you can rely on. Right. And then also, like, I think in general, I think in general you have to play at one of the extremes in terms of really fast or really slow, like play really fast, speed teams up, or just like play really slow, make it 58 possessions, because that just introduces more variance. And for an underdog, you want as much variance as possible, because, right, if Purdue and High Point in theory played a 7-game series, Purdue probably wins 4-1, but that one could come in this first game with the variance, and then that's how a team like High Point could advance.
For sure. One of the things for me that I always look at is experience and age, and this team is old, right? They, in terms of they'll run a 10-man lineup or an 11-man lineup at times. They've got 7 seniors, 2 juniors, 1 sophomore, and 1 freshman. So this team is old. This team has a lot of players that moved down from league standpoint, right? Some guys who played at Texas Tech, from some guys who played at Kansas, another guy who played at Minnesota. So some of these guys were expected to have high major talent, and maybe it didn't pan out for whatever reason. And they moved a couple of times. And now, maybe some of that original expectation has started to pay off. At the same time, this High Point team that comes in 29-5, we don't necessarily know what they can do against a high major team because they didn't play any. They only have 1 win against a Ken Palm top 100. I think 2 wins over a Ken Palm top 150, right? Or was that Ken Palm or Net that you put in your notes?
Ken Palm.
Ken Palm, right? So to some degree, we also just don't really know. And one of the other things I look at is, did this team play high major teams, and did they at least put up a fight, right, in the non-conference? And we just don't know with this team one way or another. It could pan out one way the first time they play one, and it could pan out a completely different way. But obviously a team that excels offensively, when we look at them relative to, some of the dynamic with Purdue, they rank 15th in the country in 2-point percentage, 27th at the rim, 30th in non-rim twos in the point. Some things that Purdue has struggled with defensively, but they're also a relatively good 3-point shooting team, and just all around offensively pretty good. From the offensive side of the ball, Joe, and then I'll turn it to you, Bobby, to kind of add on to it a little bit. What do you expect High Point to do on the offensive side of the ball, and where do you see them providing challenges for Purdue defensively?
Yeah, I think at their base they run similar to kind of a continuity ball screen style, right? Similar to kind of what Wisconsin did, where 5 out, 45 cut from the wing, flip it to the corner, run pick and roll. They're not as heavy in it as Wisconsin, who's like every single possession, but right, just a lot of kind of ball movement, create space, get their guys in spots, and I think like they just have enough. They have multiple guards that are just capable of kind of, I guess, wiggling their way into like the mid-range. The paints is my best way to describe it, because I don't think any of these guards are like overly athletic or anything like that. Like I don't think, right, they're not one of those mid-majors like a McNeese, right, that's just built in athleticism. I think they're built more on skill, similar to Purdue. And their guards just do a good job of being able to attack a little bit of space and get kind of into the paint, get into the rim, draw some fouls. Like I think that is something Purdue's, right? Like I think Purdue's, or 90% of Purdue's issues could be solved if guys could just stay in front. And that's easier said than done for every team. It is easier said than done. But like if Purdue can find a way to just maybe not fully stay in front, but make it a little bit tougher and allow the defense to be able to rotate, I think that's where you find success. And if not, right, you're kind of just hoping that these guards that get into the paint miss their shots, similar to what High Point's going to hope for Braden and TKR.
Right. And to flip it to you, Bobby, I guess anything else that jumped out about High Point offensively, and then, looking at that matchup, what does Purdue defensively have to excel at to slow this High Point team down? Because I was looking through their scores, and it's like 85, 90, 92. It's a lot of points, man.
Yeah, just kind of looking up and down the roster, something that stood out to me was just they have 8 different guys who average 5 points or more. And they have kind of a big three of sorts of guys that are kind of their 3 main scorers, but they got a bunch of other guys scoring 5 points or more. So they do kind of have that by committee approach to some degree. A lot of guys coming off their bench that started for them last year or played tons of games for them last year, or been in their program for a while, that are coming off the bench and giving them some firepower from that standpoint. So they do have a deep team. Kind of reminds me maybe a little bit of like a St. Peter's, as far as just like being able to bring a bunch of different guys in, and you never know whose night it's going to be necessarily. And then for us defensively, you kind of touched on it, it's just the dribble penetration. We just have to be able to keep the ball out of the painted area. We've talked about it nauseum, issues protecting the paint and defending the 2-point shot because of our lack of rim protection. I saw a clip of floating around on X the other day of Zach Edey in the Connecticut game blocking 2 shots in the same possession, and the second one he just like demolished out of bounds. And I was just like, holy cow, man! You forget how awesome his rim protection was.
He covered everything.
Yeah, it's like he covered. You could get backdoored. Whoops. Oh, it's okay. Zach beat it into the stands. Like no issues. Like this year, whoops! I get backdoored. I got caught ball watching, which some of our guys tend to do off the ball more often than you would like. Oh, it's a layup all of a sudden now, or it's a dunk because Big Z's not coming over from the weak side to erase it. So every little breakdown this year, more often than not, is getting penalized with a high percentage shot. And we didn't have that great rim protection. So that's where just being able to be assignment sound or being able to move your feet and keep the ball to the paint, not botching switches, not jumping at pun fakes on the perimeter from a guy you don't really care if he shoots. Because you bite that pump fake and all of a sudden you're behind. Now your guy's got a help side defender's got to help. And now maybe you're giving up an open and rhythm 3, or now when you have penetration, now we're in rotations, and Purdue's already not like an elite rebounding team defensively. And now if we're caught in rotations, and you have a Braden or a Fletcher Lawyer now trying to box out like a 6'8", 6'9" guy, well, we got issues as far as trying to defend the glass. That's been frustrating at times this year. Even when we do get stops, we haven't necessarily always been able to get that defensive rebound either. So, keeping the ball out of the paint, staying out of rotations would be probably one of my biggest keys defensively.
One more thing before you move on, Kraig, that I wanted to mention, just forgot. They space, I think, really, really well. Like they are deep in the corners. Or not all the time, but like there's a lot of possessions where if it's a high ball screen, both corners are filled and they're not filled. Like they are like pushed as far as they are trying to maximize as much space as possible, which is interesting for a Purdue defense that, Painter always says you don't want to live in rotations, but this defense just does have to live in rotations. That's an extra step of your rotation that you got to take if your guy is that far in the corner and they got dudes that can knock them down. So that is the one other thing I wanted to throw out there. Also, they do a good job of drawing fouls. So TKR, stay out of foul trouble, please.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my big points in terms of Purdue defensively. Just as much as they drive and attack, TKR making sure that maybe it's okay to let one go. Like go ahead. You got to stay on the court, buddy. If they get 2 points here early on in the first half, maybe that's okay. Just stay out of foul trouble. Make sure you wall up and stay on the court and live to fight for another play. I understand the corner spacing thing. And Joe, I probably did not watch as much film as you did, but it felt like offensively when they do break somebody down on the perimeter and get downhill, that they're much more in attack mode. I didn't feel like they were really skipping the ball around once they beat their defender, that they were more going to the rim. Am I right on that? Because what concerns me more than getting to the rim is when those teams start skipping it around like crazy and get Purdue on those rotations.
Yeah, no, they have one of the lowest assist rates in the country, and a product of their guards, as I said, being slithery and being able to just kind of manufacture these shots that, Giffa is the guy that really comes to mind. Number one, Keza Giffa. I would say he's their go-to guy, but like Bobby said, there's kind of a trio, and they're all similar in that, like, they're not always just going to bully you. They just get to these kind of unorthodox shots at times and unorthodox ways to get to the rim. But because of that, then they get looks when they drive and don't have to kick out.
Right. Bobby, was your alarm your cutoff? Does that mean you're done now that you?
No, I had set my alarm for 8:20 because I thought we were originally going to go on at 8:30 in the day. So I made sure I didn't forget. And then we moved it up to 8, and then I snoozed it, and then it went off again. So I've got it turned off. We're good to go.
No worries. And like with that rim, you talking about Zach Edey, just kind of erasing everything, both of you. Even if it's not Zach Edey, if it is Daniel Jacobson, if it was Isaac Haas, if it was AJ Hammonds, Matt Harms, even, right? Just a little bit of rim protection would completely change this team defensively, I feel like. But to your guys' point, perimeter defense and CJ and Miles and Jakari are going to be really important. But most of the time, only one of those guys is on the court at a time. So it's going to be really, really important for Fletcher and Braden to do what they can defensively on the perimeter as well, because more than one guy out on the floor at a time from High Point can get downhill and can break people down. To flip this then, as we look at the team perspective still, Purdue offensively, I'll throw this to you, Bobby, first this time. Where do you see Purdue being able to make their hay against this team defensively? Because High Point is not an excellent defensive team, right? They don't force turnovers. They're 225th in the country in terms of turnover rate. In terms of free throw rate, they do foul a decent amount. I think 270th in terms of putting people on the foul line from that standpoint. And maybe aren't terrible at any one thing, but aren't really good at anything defensively either. So where do you see Purdue kind of being able to make hay here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Braden's going to be critical, of course. Was talking with Coach Brantley earlier today, and he said their big guy, the big 7-footer, Bodo, I believe is how his last name is pronounced. He kind of plays that super deep drop coverage. He's a big 7-footer, similar to like what Kofi Coburn used to play with Illinois. And we've seen with Braden Smith many times that he will carve up said drop coverage. And that's where it will be huge, of course, for Braden to get off to a good start, I think, and make some shots early, because Braden, I do think, tends to, if he's making shots early in the game, it can lead to, like a lot of players, but it can lead to super big games for him where he stays on the hunt, whereas if he misses some shots early, sometimes he starts maybe to force a little bit. He gets a little more passive, and some of those pocket passes he throws to Trey are the little bit tighter windows and can maybe put Trey in some trouble. I like when Braden is like just free-flowing, playing at a high level, and he's taking the shots that come his way. And then if they take that away, well, now he's dropping off these passes into bigger windows or spraying it out to shooters. And so I think Braden should be able to have a field day, I would think, offensively against that sort of coverage. Bodo's minutes do vary quite a bit from game to game. Like, I think he played 19 last game in the championship, but then played 30 in the semifinal of their conference tournament. So, obviously matchups and stuff, if he's getting destroyed in drop coverage, they may take him out and bring in someone else. But that also could work in our favor for other ways, because he's their 2-time conference player of the year defensively and a great shot blocker. And so if he's off the floor, well, now maybe Trey is able to feast more in the painted area. I do think overall they don't have a ton of length. They seem to play, a lot of kind of guys in that 6'6" and under range outside of Bodo. And so hopefully, that can be something that works in our favor, is they're not just this super long athletic team flying around.
Joe?
Yeah. My bad. I didn't know if it was going straight to me or if we were.
You're
but
good.
I'll go.
You're good.
Agree with obviously a lot what Bobby said. Side note, Bodo, I have no sources or anything. I would be shocked if that dude does not get paid this offseason. Not that he's like the best big in the world, but 7-footers that rebound and block shots like that are pretty hard to come by. And so shout out to him. He's my we're getting off topic. I'm sorry. But when I watched him, my immediate thought was like, oh, this is who Michigan State wanted Zapala to be. Like that's exactly what they wanted. Right? Just rebounder, block shots, protect the paint, maybe finish some dunks at the rim. But no, what Bobby said, right? The mid-range, it's going to be there. They play that deep drop. They do switch a lot off ball, especially with their guards, and they'll play three to even 4 kind of guard, smaller wings. And so I think, right, the biggest thing I'm curious to see is, especially when Bodo's in, how do they match up, right? When Bodo's in and first in TKR, do they put him on TKR to defend, like try to defend the post-ups more with Bodo, but then you're also putting him in actually that drop coverage? Or do they put him on first? Because from what I saw, High Point doesn't necessarily want to send a ton of help, like on drives and things, but they will off certain matchups. And if you're talking about Purdue sending help, first is the guy you're going to send the help off of. And so I'm very fascinated to see when he's in, what exactly, like how exactly does High Point match up, and then how does Purdue counter, right? And my thought is, well, if it's a smaller guard or like a wing on TKR, probably just go into the post, or you even set a screen, get the switch, and then feed the post. Or if it's Bodo, then it's pick and roll, pick and roll, pick and roll, pick and roll, and let Braden just operate in that mid-range, TKR in the short roll, right? Like, I still stand by, I think, if you play drop coverage against Purdue, you're just simply hoping that Purdue misses open shots.
Yeah, and obviously not a team that's very good in terms of post defense, right? Bottom 15%. I don't know if somebody said this already or not in terms of defensive post up defense on that standpoint. It feels like a game that's going to be, and for a certain percentage of Purdue's fan base, much to their chagrin, it feels like a game that could turn into a lot of a two-man game with Braden and TKR in this particular matchup. I would remind those fans that this is a very, very highly ranked Purdue offense, and a lot of it is predicated on that. So when it's working, let it roll, man, as far as I'm concerned. Joe, to turn this to some of the players specific from High Point, as we always do in these preview shows, I go over pronunciations before the show started, and I forgot to ask you. So if I butcher these, just correct me.
I got the pronunciation guide on the game notes right here in front of me, so I'll help you out.
Well, you can correct me then. So we always start with the kind of the starting guard wing room. I'm taking this based off of what you put on the Feed the Post note, so I'm just assuming the first 5 guys you listed were the starters. There we go.
I mean, it is a little interchangeable, but yeah, those 5 are, I would bet, are the starters.
All right, so we've got Kezigifa, 6'2", Jiffa, dang it. I screwed up the first one. The first one.
Giffa.
This has it as JIF-UH. So I think that would be Jiffa.
So on the social media, GIF, do we call that a GIF or a GIF?
GIF.
Yeah, GIF.
See, I just assumed it was Giffa because of that. But anyway, all right. Keza All right. Averaging 14.8 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 6'2", senior guard from France who originally played at UTEP. You've got Chase Johnson, a 6'2", 185-pound, also senior guard, coming into the game, averaging 7 points, 1.8 rebounds, 0.9 assists, who played at Stetson and FGSU, Florida Gulf Coast before this. And then
quick aside on Johnson, sorry to interrupt. Was Isaiah Thompson's roommate for 2 years at Florida Gulf Coast. So
really, are they trading notes?
Hopefully, only Johnson's giving us everything, and Isaiah says, "Yeah, you send it to me first, and then I'll send it back," and then he doesn't send it.
That's 2 connections. I'm scared about people trading notes because with Rafael playing for the head coach, man, okay. Demarion Williams at the wing, 6'5", 195-pound, also senior wing, who originally played. I have GW in here, and I forget what GW was, Joe, of where he originally started out. He eventually played at Texas Tech.
The only thing I'm seeing on here is Texas Tech, but
fair enough.
He may have been somewhere else before.
Averaging 13.5 points a game, 3.4 rebounds, and 2.3 assists. Like you guys said, they're
Gardner Webb.
Gardner Webb. I knew it wasn't George Washington. I remembered that, so I was like, I'm not going with that. A perimeter lineup that one of the things that scares me in terms of teams facing up at Purdue is teams that have a lot of length at the guard and wing room, and I don't know that this is a matchup that necessarily has that, but obviously has a lot of skill, has a lot of offensive ability. To me, they're hoopers, right? When you just say a hooper, guys that can figure out how to make tough shots. Joe, rattle off a little bit about these 3 guys, and then Bobby, if you want to jump in as well about things you've seen from scouting them.
Yeah, so starting with Jiffa, not a great shooter, 3-point shooter, but good from the mid-range, gets to the rim. He's good in pick and rolls and spot ups. Like he's just, you said it, he's a hooper. He is capable driver, like on kickouts. But when he's off ball, it's more of just a catch and shoot 3. When he's on ball, like pick and rolls, that's when he really wants to get downhill. And I think the best way I can describe him is like he's a very fluid mover. But what I'm about to say is the complete opposite. But he's like herky-jerky. Like he has very good control of pace. And because he's 6'2", listed at 6'2", 170, like dude's not big, but he makes up for it with just being able to get defenders kind of off speed a little bit, off their balance.
Is he like a guard version of Trey Kaufman-Renn kind of?
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, exactly. Where he can just kind of get off their spot with different ways. Really good body control. Johnson, basically everything's a 3-point jumper. He's been elite from the corners. I mentioned the corners earlier. Do not leave him open. Cannot leave him open. He is 55% on open catch and shoot threes this year. He's 37% uncontested. He's not going to get to the rim. I would.
Do you see how many free throw attempts
I would
Johnson
guess
has
lawyers
this year?
on him. What's
yeah,
up?
I would guess. I would guess Fletch is on him too. Did you see how many free throw attempts Johnston's taken this year? It's
I'm
hilarious.
looking it up now. 2. He is 1 for.
No, 4. Well, I see. This shows 2 for 4 on this thing here, but.
Oh no, you're
either way,
4.
not
You're
very
4. You're
many.
right. You're probably right. They played Ken Palm doesn't count like D2 teams in the total stats, and that's what I was looking at. So you're right.
Maybe
4.
that's what it was then. Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, he's taken a ton of shots this year, majority of them threes, but pretty insane to think a guy who starts and is impactful as he is for them has only gotten to the line 4 times all year. So foul him late in the game. He won't know what to do. Hopefully we're not in that situation.
Yeah, for real. True. Hopefully not. DeMaurian Williams, good 3-point shooter, gets to the rim, more of a spot up guy, like a little bit more off ball. I think he's a solid facilitator. He is 6'5", 200, so he's a guy that will have a little bit of size. Can probably, whether it's, I would assume then that's probably Braden on him, although I'm not confident in that. Either way, Braden, CJ, Jakari, like he was going to try to get them to the rim and does a good job of it. So I think those are the 3 guys you named.
Yep. It was.
Cool.
Anything else to add to that, Bobby, or do you what do you see the defensive matchup potentially being here? Or
Yeah,
if you actually know, don't say.
I don't actually know. I hope to find out in the next couple days, but no, I don't actually know for sure. But you guys have such a good pulse on what our alignments are defensively most games that I think Joe's probably going to be spot on with that. What he said makes sense to have Fletch probably chase the shooter, Chase Johnson, and he's one of those guys. I remember watching their game against Indiana last year when Florida Gulf Coast was at Indiana because I was excited, hoping to watch Isaiah go into Assembly Hall and get buckets, but Isaiah ended up having to sit out that game with I think like a shoulder injury or something of some sort. But of course, I was going to watch and hope IU struggled, so I stayed in and watched a little bit. And I remember Johnson was launching that game like there was no shot that he didn't like to take, and was taking deep threes and looking through his box score. He's like in the last game in the championship. Kind of crazy to think they won with him going 0 for 7 from 3. They came back from 15 down and to come back and win that conference championship game. But he went 0 for 7 from 3 and struggled. But he also had a game where he was 8 for 11 this year, 8 for 13. Then he had a 9 for 11. But then he also had a 2 for 10. So like he's going to let it rip, and appears and he shoots a good percentage, 43%. But he obviously can also have these games where he makes a ton or misses a ton. But in these one and done scenarios, he's a guy that we just cannot let see the ball go in a lot early, I feel like, because then all of a sudden now he's hitting bombs in transition and really gets things rolling. And then, Jiffa and Williams, I think those are guys that, like Joe said, they're capable perimeter shooters, but they really want to drive the ball first and foremost. Jiffa likes to go to his left. Williams more of a right-handed driver, and they're both going to attack the rim. And that's where for us, dribble penetration, dribble containment on that penetration is going to be huge.
Right. And then kind of going to the bigs here. Kamani Hamilton, 6'7", 215-pound junior forward. Previously played at Mississippi State, averaging 13.4 points a game, 4.7 rebounds, 2 point. I feel like everybody on this team in the starting 5 averages like 2 assists, other than Chase Johnson, who apparently just shoots the ball. And then Bodo, and then Bodo is 7 foot, sophomore center. One of the only 2 underclassmen that really gets playing time on this team as well, comes into the game averaging only 5.3 points, but 8.4 rebounds. One of the best, actually, statistically, the best offensive rebounder in college basketball, right, Joe? Coming in this game, tell us a little bit about these 2 guys.
Yeah. So Kamani Hamilton, he's the only guy really on this roster that like has been one will take a decent chunk of well, not the only one that'll take a decent chunk of mid-range, but he is very, very good from the mid-range area. That 4 to like 15 foot at his size, able to get to the pull-ups, which he has shot very, very well on. He's a guy, right? Not really a shooter. What is his percentage on the year? Yeah, 33%. So like, again, not a guy you can just leave alone on the perimeter, but another guy that really wants to get downhill, good rebounder, good facilitator, can be used as a screener. He'll pop some, he'll roll some, just kind of a little bit of can do a little bit of everything for them offensively. And then Bodo, really, really good rim protector defensively. We talked about that. Highest offensive rebounding percentage in the entire country. When he is on the floor, he himself rebounds 18% of his team's misses. Not high point. Like he himself rebounds 18% of high points misses when he's on the floor. So that is the best rate in the entire country. He's I wouldn't call him a mobile big, but he still moves well. He's not like one of these ultra stiff, like 7-footers that you see at times. But yeah, everything for him in the paints, dump offs at the rim, lobs, putbacks, things like that. Like that's where he's going to get his shots.
Is he someone you've seen from what you've watched? Is he someone who's a big lob threat, like big time lob threat, or is it like on occasion?
I wouldn't say like big time, maybe, but
like the way Michigan State and some of those teams were getting us on lobs, like we got to be aware of that. Is what you're
for sure. Like it's like Michigan State will force it if they need to, if they have like a little sliver. I don't think High Point does that with Bodo. It's more of a he's kind of wide open and like
sure,
or like
he's
bigger than
so
these guys.
Like
we're just gonna exactly.
Are those guys big time lob threats all the time, or are they big time lob threats because Purdue gets beat off the ball on the perimeter and then help has to come? Now, that would be my question.
I see Michigan State is hanging on rims a lot, but you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, Purdue defense plays a part in that for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Joe, I'm going to talk about one guy off the bench, and I know this team literally plays 11 different people at sometimes, but there's one guy I want to highlight, and then I'm going to kind of turn it over to you to highlight whoever you want to, or all 5 of the other guys if you feel like we should. This is, I forget what other game we did. Maybe it was, I can't remember. There was one other game we did where it was a bench player that scared me the most, and then that bench player went for like 20 on us. And I can't remember now off the top of my head, but Bobby Pettiford scares me more than anybody else on this team offensively in terms of what he can do and what I saw on film and where Purdue's guards struggle. 6'1", 190 pounds, senior point guard, another senior on this team who started out at Kansas, then went to Eastern Carolina, and then eventually ended up at High Point, averaging 8.9 points per game, 2.4 rebounds, and 3.4 assists. If you happen to watch the film in their conference championship game, though, like he kind of just took the game over at one point during that game. Can get to the rim, super physical, maybe not an incredible 3-point threat, but he hit some in that game, and he's got a little floater in his game too. So I'll let you kind of riff on him for a second and then highlight whoever else you want to off the bench, and you and Bobby can kind of talk about those guys.
Yeah, no, Pettiford is a dude, like he's their 6th man. He can play starter minutes in any given game. Going to run pick and roll a lot. Really good finisher and really good touch on floaters. So if you do play drop, like he's going to try to get to those floaters. TKR will probably play drop. Probably want to force him more to just be a full like pull up shooter. If he's hitting 15-footers, then like, all right, you live with that and you kind of move on. Also, but what makes him I think dangerous is he can facilitate too. Like he can get 2 feet in the paint more or less whenever he wants, even at his size, and then he can spray to where he needs to. So, no, I'm with you. He is definitely a guy that definitely have to be aware of. Other guys, I won't go super in depth, but they do, like you said, they have 10 to 11 guys that they can play. At times, it can hurt them a bit, I think, where it takes them 20 to 25 minutes to really figure out what lineup they need to go to. I think that's probably what happened in their championship game where they're down 15. Figure out where they need to go and then work from there. Trey Benham, number 3, shooter, run him off the line. He's 50% on open threes, 26% on contested. Get a hand up. Don't let him get open looks. Adule Thiam, He's kind of an athletic guy that wants to finish around the rim, more of an off-ball cutter, even at his size 6'4". Can take advantage of smaller matchups. So if Braden or Fletch is on him, they'll probably try to go at him. I think the only other guy I'll probably just mention is Simon Hildebrandt, 6'9" forward. He can be there. He's kind of their backup 5. He is not a rim protector. Mainly used as a screener, but can be a pick and pop threat. Good finishing at the rim, right? Like the theme I think across the board for these high point players is like most of them are pretty good finishers or decent finishers around the rim. You sprinkle in a couple really great shooters, and then a couple decent shooters, and then a couple ball handlers to pair. It's a good balanced offense.
Yeah, I agree. They do have a nice balanced kind of group of skill sets. Pettiford, the Kansas transfer, certainly that raises your eyebrows, right? Whenever you see someone like, went to Kansas out of high school, like, that's something that certainly grabs your attention because Kansas doesn't just recruit anybody. So clearly a guy who's got a lot of talent. Kraig talked about him in that conference championship game. He ended up being named MVP of that Big South Conference tournament. And he's interesting. He's, Joe touched on some of his skill sets. He's only taken 19 threes on the year. He's 8 of 19. So it'll be interesting if he is as dynamic as he is, as Joe talked about, kind of with some of those floaters, the in-between game facilitating. It'll be interesting to see how Purdue decides to guard him. There's that kind of fine line between, do you try to get out and pressure him and make him uncomfortable and, go over ball screens to try to take away vision and things of that nature? Or do you maybe just say, hey, this is a guy that if he wants to step back and try to shoot a bunch of threes, which we don't think he even will take, but even if he does, he's not a guy is a major league threat from that standpoint. Do you try to maybe go under and just try to avoid him getting into the teeth of the defense to begin with? It'll be interesting to see how Purdue handles that, because I know they've kind of gone both routes at times this year when they've been guarding guys of his similar skill set as far as a guy who's not a high-volume three-point shooter. So, it'll be interesting because, he's clearly a guy who's really impactful for them, even though he doesn't start. And then all those other guys just seem like guys that can step up any given night. And a lot of those guys that Joe mentioned had really nice games in that conference championship game. One of my keys to the game is going to be talking about their bench. They had the 27th in the country in bench points. So, they get lots of contributions from their bench. And in that conference championship game in particular, a lot of those guys end up having really productive nights. So, Purdue's bench has not been something that's been great a lot this year. I do think Jakari Harris, Miles, and Cam, kind of those 3 main guys in particular, have all been playing some of their best basketball here as of late. So hopefully that's a good sign for them coming in and giving contributions, because obviously the big 3 for Purdue are going to have to play well. If they all play poorly together in the same game like they did the other night against Michigan, we're probably going home. But even if those big 3 do their part, we still, to be good teams, which every team in the NCAA tournament is, you need some other production from other places. So hopefully some of those guys are hitting their stride at the right time for us.
Right. I think we've kept you like 20 minutes over already, what we told you we were going to, but
time flies when you're having fun.
It's the flow of conversation here, Bobby, and I know you got places to be. So high level, big picture, right? At the end of the day, this High Point team has been a popular pick for upsets, and it always kind of cracks me up because it feels like whatever the 2 most popular picks are that everybody's talking about never actually happen. And it's always the ones that you don't expect for the most part. I could be wrong. On that, but it feels like that anecdotally going into these NCAA tournaments. But at the end of the day, right, High Point has not played anybody near to the level of Purdue's caliber. Purdue has 2 all Big Ten first team players on this team. They have Fletcher Lawyer. They have the experience. They've got more size. They've got more athleticism. Obviously, they do some things well that Purdue struggles to defend against. But High Point's put up those numbers against, right, only one team that was in the top 100. So Purdue should come away winning this game, and they should win it, in my opinion, by double digits. Bobby, if you were going to say keys to the game, these things have to happen for Purdue to win the game, and then I want to go to Joe, I'll come back to you for starred comments so we can let Bobby get off of here after this. But I want to go to a couple of starred comments that were directly addressed to you, Bobby, after you give your keys to the game. And then, Joe, I'll come back to you and we can let Bobby go.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think for offensively, we got to play well. Like you can't just have a horrid shooting day. And we've unfortunately seen some of those horrid shooting days from Purdue teams against double-digit seeds in the past. And hopefully that does not come to fruition. I'm curious. I'm going to do a little further research between now and the game and just kind of see what our overall numbers have been this year when we've played teams that, defensive efficiency-wise don't stack up great, because it just feels like on the surface from just, playing teams like Iowa or Rutgers, teams that aren't great defensive teams this year, we've really thrived. And so hopefully that carries over against a team like High Point, who doesn't, analytically have a great defensive numbers. So I do think we need to just, be on the offensive and go, attack them, attack their weakness. Because I agree with you, Kraig, like they have not seen anyone like Kaufman-Renn this year. They have not seen anyone like Braden Smith this year. And so I hope those guys are just on the offensive from the jump and are playing with a lot of confidence. And I think that works in our favor. But then, defensively, I think we have to just make sure we're not, just allowing a ton of easy buckets. Like we can't be giving up a bunch of layups and dunks and stuff like that we have on occasion, done to some teams this year, especially when we've struggled. Just allowed way too many high percentage shots on like back doors or, against Michigan State, not like helping it and taking away lobs and dunks. Like even though High Point's fully capable of having a nice 3-point shooting game, they're not like Liberty. They're not some like unbelievable 3-point shooting team. And so rather than give up a dunk or layup, like make, Jiffa make, a high quality or a high quantity of threes or something, right? He's not a big time 3-point shooter. Chase Johnson will be the one guy that like, hey, we're not letting this dude get loose. We're not letting him see the ball going early. And that's where, defensive rebounding is going to be critical. Like if you're giving up offensive rebounds, kick out to Johnson, open three in rhythm, like you're just going to be in for a potential long afternoon. So those are probably some of my keys.
All right, good deal. Love to hear it. A few starred comments, I think, that are aimed specifically towards you as somebody who's played with the program and or just telling you that you're awesome, Bobby, which we all know. PSTC, I don't know what that stands for. I often tune into the radio program before the TV coverage starts to hear the game previews. You and Rob are great. Love hearing your perspective and inside anecdotes, Bobby.
Awesome.
And then the other two. All right. Any comments on having non-Big Ten refs, pro or con? There's first of all, there's not really a thing as Big Ten refs, right? Refs move around, but maybe there's preference that they
have a primary.
Right.
They have right. I think a lot of these refs will have a primary conference, a secondary conference, and then even like a third and fourth. So like a lot of times Big Ten plays on Sundays, and not a lot of other conferences do play on Sundays. So the Big Ten for some of those big Sunday games will be able to poach like a main ACC ref or a main Big 12 ref for those games that are coveted guys that are high profile. But for kind of all the midweek games and Saturday games where all those other conferences are flowing, you kind of have your primary group of refs that are assigned to each conference. And whether I think it's good or bad, I mean, I don't think it doesn't feel like the Big Ten refs have been totally awesome this year, just as a whole. Obviously, we've had some games specifically on the road, which is not uncommon, where I feel like, we've got a little bit of a tough shake, but I'm sure other teams have felt like they got some tough shakes in Mackey as well. So it goes both ways. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different this year. Like Zach, when we had Zach, it was all like, what's it going to be like when you get these refs that maybe aren't as accustomed to refereeing Zach? Is it going to work in our favor or, not in our favor? And it was hard to know, because Zach is just such a hard guy to ref. I don't know if our team this year is necessarily super hard to ref compared to maybe some other teams.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the conversation in the past has been like when fans watch an SEC game or watch a Big 12 game, they feel like it's officiated differently from a physicality standpoint, either down low or on the perimeter. And I feel like it's kind of the fans' assumption is that it's almost like kind of flipped from what it is in the Big Ten. Do you see that when you watch games, or do you think that's just a bunch of crazy talk?
I don't think it's anything, massive from a differentiating standpoint. I think some Big Ten games are called really physical and some aren't. I think styles of play more than anything is really what it comes down to. Yeah, what it dictates it. Because there's definitely some SEC games where you're just like, wow, these dudes are killing each other, and refs are blowing their whistle every 2 seconds, or vice versa, and these dudes are killing each other and they're not blowing their whistle. So it kind of varies to me.
Last thing from a player perspective, then we're going to let you go, Bobby, and I hope that you ever come on our show again after we held you over so much longer. Heather Garrison, anyone worried about the early tip time? Almost all the games have been 8 p.m. or after this year. As a player, is there anything to the timing of the games themselves that messes you up, or that you prefer, like had personal preferences to play an early game or a late game or anything like that?
I never really, remembered having a preference or hating one of the others. Sasha Stefanovic, who's, on the staff now and is a recent player, he did say he loved playing these like day games, like noon was like his deal. He hated having to wait around for these 9 o'clock games. So I jokingly, when we were walking in the hotel tonight, I was like, Sasha, it's a noon game. You got to be hyped about that. And he's like, oh yeah, maybe. I was like, oh yeah, our out of bounds plays are going to be on point. There's no way we're going to have any bad out of bounds plays with you running the show, considering it's a noon, close to noon tip. So we were joking about that because he prefers kind of those earlier tip times. Because some guys I don't think like waiting around all day long, especially when you get to the NCAA tournament. I think it works in our favor. Like, we're probably itching to play. We lost our last game. The last thing I think our guys probably would want to do is just wait around and play some like 9:40 tip time. So hopefully it works in our favor to be able to get out there and let it rip.
And I also just feel like there's this thing, and whether teams, coaches, players say they pay attention to what else is going on around the country or not, like, I have a hard time buying they don't see a little bit here and there.
Oh,
I always feel like the dam breaks. Like, you're like, where's the upset? Where's the upset? And then the upset comes, and then all of a sudden the upset starts coming, like the lower level team starts believing like, oh, that 2 seed just beat a 15. We can do this, or type of thing. So yeah, Bobby, thank you so much again for joining us. Hopefully you will join us again. I'm sorry we kept you so long.
No, I had a good time, guys. It was fun.
Awesome. All right. We will see you, or I will. Joe is not dedicated enough to go to Providence.
Jeez,
so
Joe.
I will see you.
I got too much stuff with Feed the Post I got to do, because when Purdue wins, that means I got to turn around and prep either Clemson or McNeese. That's why I'm not there.
We're going to hopefully see Joe in Indianapolis next weekend. So.
That you will.
Yes, for sure. So I will see you Thursday, Bobby. We'll talk to you later. Thanks again for coming on the show.
All right, man. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and looking forward to seeing you, Kraig. We'll chat it up on Thursday.
All right, sounds good.
That was Bobby Riddell, Bobby Buckets. So got through a lot of the preview. I know there's still some star comments we want to go through. I guess before we do that, what are your keys to the game?
Well, that's where I was going to flip it to you.
Well,
I think for me, just absolute number one is on-ball defense, right? So I'm not as worried about it from the one thing for me watching this team was like, man, it doesn't feel like they swing it. Like, when they beat a defender, it feels like even if somebody comes over, they're still going to contest that guy and try to go to the rim. They're going to try to attack the rim. So I don't worry about it quite as much from like a beat the defender, get 2 feet in the paint, cause somebody to come help and swing. But I still think defensively it boils down to just being able to stay in front of your man. I think that's vital, but almost more importantly than that, because this team is not high level defensively and they've not played a single team all year that is near what Purdue is offensively, I think it's vital that Purdue gets out to a quick start offensively and is just hitting shots right off the back. Because for me, I don't think that this High Point team against a team the caliber of Purdue is capable of stringing together, kind of like we've seen Purdue in a few of these games late, where you're like, offensively, we're doing enough to come back, but we can't get this string together enough stops to come back. I think if Purdue comes out confident and everybody's shooting confident, Braden's hitting his shots, TKR's hitting his shots, role players are being confident and stepping into it. And if Purdue gets up to a 10 or 12 point lead, I just don't know that this High Point team is capable of doing enough defensively to slow Purdue down to make it a game again.
Yeah, my realistic key to the game is kind of on par with that. It's like, I know all the talks defense and all that. The defense is what it is. I trust Purdue. Like, right, this is going to be a 60 to 65 possession game. I trust Purdue to generate more good looks on those possessions than High Point. High Point's going to get plenty of good looks, but like Purdue is a better offense for a reason, and High Point does have a worse defense. And like Braden and TKR just are going to get looks. You got to make them. We've seen a couple games that Ohio State lost. Like, just shots sometimes just don't fall. Now, if that happens, that's when things can get dicey. But just get good looks and make them. Like, if that happens, I don't think High Point can keep up. And then I don't know if I have to, be ultra concerned about the defense. Obviously, if the defense wanted to step up a bit, that would be a huge help as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
Just be comfortable. Just, literally just score the ball. Like, hey, novel idea, I guess. I don't know. Just score the ball, and they should be fine. And right, because I think the other thing is TKR is just so dominant as a big in the post. Like, it's just hard to overcome that as a defense. And then I know everybody will be like, FDU put 3 guys on Edie, and Purdue couldn't buy an outside shot. And I think the difference this year is you have Braden Smith now too. Like, this Braden Smith, not that Braden. That Braden Smith was still good, but that Braden Smith was very young. This Braden Smith can still
this
just take
Fletcher
over
lawyer
games. And
this Fletcher lawyer. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, there are. I know it's weird saying this because it literally just happened a singular game ago, but it is. I don't think it's very, very common at all for all 3 of them to not show up. Like, I would be shocked if at minimum 2 don't show up well.
Yeah. I mean, if Purdue comes out and just like has one of those games like, oh crap, it's going to be a 35% field goal percentage game, then that opens the door. Like, that definitely opens the door. But I don't see that happening a couple of games in a row. This isn't off a back-to-back day type of game like that Michigan game was. And we've just seen it so rarely. And this, by and large, I guess you say Penn State's not a super high talent team. Like, Ohio State is a high talent team. They just didn't maximize their talent, right? Purdue, by and large, is taking care of teams that were just less talented, right? All year long. It's teams that were on par with them from a talent standpoint or above them from a talent standpoint that they've struggled with. And I don't think we've seen them struggle with people lower down the rankings on the metric standpoint and that stuff. For the most part, like much further down, mid-major type teams, I guess is what I was going at there. I don't know if I made any sense at all of that, but we're going to go to the starred comments because we're an hour and 7 minutes in, and Joe and I talked about this being like a 40-minute show. Scott White says, Joe, are you frozen again? Gosh dang it. Joe says, have we heard anything about Fletcher's injury? Is he good to go? Painter said that it was a sprain and that he wasn't going to practice, but he expected him to play. And when he said not practice, he meant that following day or that day, I guess, at the press conference was. It's full expectation that he's going to play. They officially called it a sprain. There was nothing in terms of what they said from the press conference that made anybody think that Fletch would not show up to play in this game. And even though Fletch is maybe a little bit slighter build of a guy, we've seen him take hits and go down. We've seen him play through injury. He had a hamstring thing that he dealt with, a calf injury type thing that he dealt with a lot of his freshman year. I fully expect him to play. Hey, Joe. JB with the $5.
I promise you, I literally do. I have never, ever, ever have internet issues except for when we record. I don't know if it's a StreamYard thing and with working with my laptop, and it just
we're not
drains.
recording. We're live.
Live.
Okay, I see.
It doesn't matter. Like, this is the only time I ever have issues. I don't get it. So sorry. Continue.
Yep. JB with a $5.06 super chat saying, hoping this is not our last preview of the season. Obviously, we hope that's the case as well. Want to see this keep going as long as possible, especially Joe, so he can go watch them play in Indianapolis this next weekend. JB also, I think you started this, so I'll let you do it.
I don't remember starring it, but he says, personally, I'd be less aggressive on the perimeter and try to keep the opposition out of the lane at all costs. If they kill us from outside, so be it. Aside from like two specific guys, I tend to agree. And I wouldn't use the verbiage of less aggressive, but I get what they mean, like of just like going under screens. I still want to be physical, like still want to try to be disruptive, but if you go under and if they want to hit step back, pull up threes, cool, right? You can adjust from there, but I wouldn't hate seeing that to start.
Yeah. Matt Keller says, do you think Painter comes up with a new defensive scheme for this tournament as teams won't have much time to prepare? I personally know. This team has struggled defensively enough all year. I don't think there's a world where Painter is like that. There's not something Painter hasn't tried at this point from a scheme standpoint to try to make this team better. You don't go through a 6 out of 9 losing streak and not try to throw everything out there but the kitchen sink. This isn't. I guess when you say this, I think to like FDU versus Purdue. Like, we are the complete underdog. We're going to throw everything out there. We're going to sell out. And every time Edey catches the ball on the catch, we're sending 3 guys at him. And just pray to God that nobody else can hit a shot situation. Like, Purdue's not at that much of a lack of a talent standpoint that they're going to do something crazy like that from my mind. And I don't think there's any little, I mean, there might be some little tweaks, right? Really, really small things that are matchup dependent, but I don't see anything big that Purdue can switch from what they've done already this year.
Yeah, I'm with you, right? There's little tweaks and little adjustments to game plan and personnel, but from a philosophy standpoint, like they're going to do what they can do. And like you said, Painter has tried a bunch of different stuff. I know people have said, like, why don't you switch schemes and just things like that. Like, Painter's tried. There's only so much he can do this year, and guys just got to be able to be bought in and just stay in. Like, I promise, if some of these, like if Purdue on the perimeter could just stay in front, just 50% better, like it would solve not every issue. This wouldn't be a top 10 defense, but it would be a much more manageable defense.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Painter didn't double the post in a game this year. Yeah. Like, there was a game where he was like, no, we're not going to double the post anymore. I cannot remember a game in the last 5 or 6 years that they didn't double the post automatically. So he's tried different things if we're going to go to that standpoint. Who's Johnny says High Point like to run and gun. I think you started this show.
So this is not, I am not trying to call out Who's Johnny specifically. I've seen this be thrown around and like, I just disagree. Like, High Point will get out in transition and they will run, no doubt, but they are below D1 average in transition usage. They are about like basically right spot on D1 average in terms of offensive tempo. Can they get out and run, and will they at times? Sure. I've seen it a few times, and it's just like I would not classify this High Point team as a run and gun, high octane, fast paced offense. They have dudes that can do it, but it's going to be more in spots and not like that's not their identity to me. Is I guess where I'm getting. It's more of just something they can do.
I think I agree with you both a little bit here. And I guess let me explain where I'm coming from on this. I don't feel like it looks like a super high-paced offense because they don't create a lot of turnovers and get out on true transition. The one thing that I would say to Who's Johnny's point is the couple of games of film that I watched, it did look like they would get out and go off defensive rebounds. And just a guy... I don't know whether it would be called true transition or not, because a guy might bring the ball up off a defensive rebound and it might be 3-on-3, but he's like, I'm still going to attack the rim right now. So I do think you have to get set defensively off of misses very quickly because they want to attack the rim. And if they feel like they have a one-on-one situation with one of their perimeter players, they'll do it very, very early in their offense before the entire defense is set. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And like I said, like High Point it's not like they're going to walk it up, but I guess, and it may be just how I take, like when I think run and gun, it's like 80 possessions a game. Like we're getting a shot up in 10 seconds every single time. And like, that is not High Point to me at all.
Right on. Blake Widmer says March. I just unstarred his comment. He said something about the ending of the game. What happened at the end of this first game, Joe? I know you probably have the TV on in the background.
It was a full court, like Hail Mary pass that kind of got tipped around and then put up for a game-winning layup.
Wow. All right. Well, March Madness is rolling. Even though I don't technically consider this March Madness yet, I consider this a play-in game, but
it's March Madness to me. Especially these 16 seeds, to me they deserve it. Of like, yeah, they made it.
No, it makes me mad that these 16 seeds have to play this game. And I did see something. Maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody else that was like, actually, these 16 seeds don't get mad about it because if they win the game, like they get more money or something, and they have a better chance of winning the game when it's 16 versus 16. I don't know.
Yeah, that was where I was going, because I think I used to be more with your thinking of like, hey, it's kind of dumb, but then it makes sense. Like, right, that game, Alabama State versus St. Francis, like. Nobody else, the 5% diehards or 1% diehards, they've watched them. But aside from that, this is the only time they'll get any school recognition the whole year. And then also the winner, who I think was Alabama's, I don't remember if it was Alabama's. Yeah, Alabama State. Like they do them, and I believe their conference like gets money from winning. And for these small conferences, I guess that is probably pretty massive. Which is why when you look at some of these smaller conferences, their conference tournaments have like their two best teams basically getting buys until the final. That's on purpose because the conference has an incentive to send their best team, because if they send their best team, that means they're more likely to win. And if they're more likely to win, that means the conference is more likely to earn some money that they need.
I'm following you. I guess you've changed my mind, Joe. I've shown that I can be a reasonable person on air, and you have convinced me to quit calling these. When it's North Carolina versus who's North Carolina playing?
Is it Texas? No, San Diego State. That one's fine calling a play-in.
Okay,
to me,
that's what I was. When it's two like more major power conference teams, can I still joke and call that a play-in game at least?
I think that's fine. Yeah, they're not. I don't think North Carolina is in desperate need of money.
All right. Before I send it to you, Joe, to tell people again what time, what station, and where Purdue basketball is playing on Thursday. I'm going to be out in Providence covering this team, and I'm hoping that they win the next two games, and we all come back to Indianapolis, and I get to come on air again. But I'm going to be there covering the press conferences, and depending on the situation and whether or not I can find room to come on air, there's a chance that you may only see Joe and Kraig for those two games. And I'm saying two games because we're going to have two games out in Providence. So if for some reason I don't get a chance to come back on air before the end of the season, I just want to thank everybody as fans for tuning in and listening. I get to stand in the greatness of the Joe Jackson wisdom and host this and fire questions back and forth. And give my opinion as well to everybody out there. I live in Lafayette. And this year, more than any, just people randomly coming up to me at different places and saying, hey, we watched the show. Many of you guys know that I work for Ivy Tech as a department chair in my program. So I go out on visits to dual credit places, and had a principal who came up and started talking to me on one of those visits immediately about the show and opinions about Purdue basketball. And I enjoy those. I enjoy all of those interactions. I'm so thrilled to be able to do this and so happy that we can bring you guys something that you guys like to watch. And whether it's super chats or views that you guys give us on YouTube or our sponsors, that have been with us throughout this entire year that enable me to go to these games, be around the Purdue basketball team, be around all the other press that cover Purdue basketball, and be able to view these live and in person. Just want to say a big thank you to all of you in case, by chance, I'm not back on air before the season ends. So thank you very much. Joe, fire away.
Yeah, it also gave me plenty of time because I have like a whole calendar thing on my laptop of like every single Big Ten game. Don't have that for the tournament, so I got to pull that up. 12:40 Eastern Time tip on True TV. Purdue takes on High Point out in Providence, where Kraig will be, and yeah, we will be live like right after the final buzzer. So tune in for a bit. Obviously, I know be watching games while also doing the post game show, as I'm sure everybody else will be too. The 2 best days of the year, in my opinion. I am very, very excited for them, and yeah, hoping we'll have another preview come. Or I don't know if we'll have a preview before Clemson, maybe TBD on, or not Clemson McNeese, because I don't actually know who wins that. But now I'm rambling. Getting the Midwestern goodbye. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and I for sure will see you post game. Maybe Kraig, maybe Braggs. We'll figure it out, but there will be one. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you then.